Good afternoon, everyone. The time now is 2:00. Call to order the meeting of the Orange County Sewer District No.1 Advisory Committee for Tuesday, May 20th. A copy of the agenda for this meeting may be found on the county website under the tab for the legislature. Please silence your phones and electronic devices. At this time, I ask you to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kelly, can you do roll call, please?
Yes. Emma?
Here.
Finelli? Keeney?
Here.
Ellers?
Here.
Boto?
Here.
Here.
I present one.
Okay. All right, Bob Grace here. We can start now.
It's right behind me.
All right, first up, we have Joe Mahoney, who's not with us. We have Robert Gray, Deputy Commissioner, EF&S. We have Anthony Griffith, Consultant, Department of Public Works, EF&S, and Mary Beth Bianconi, Partner, Delaware Engineering, DPC. You guys want to come on down?
Start with the little boys' room.
All right. I have a feeling this could be a meeting. We've done a lot of the groundwork, and we're moving towards the submission of the applications on May 30th, so 10 days away. And Mary Beth, if you want to just give us a brief overview and regarding the design phase update for the Harriman wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. Yes. Thank you. It's nice to see everyone on this nice sunny day.
I also, before you start, Mary Beth, I just want the records to show that we have Mayor Mitchell and Councilwoman Carol Schneider.
Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor, sorry.
Schneider. That's okay.
Sorry. We also have Councilwoman Mary Kim from the town of Monroe and Vidalia Zegedin, the town administrator over at Palm Tree. Thank you.
All right, everyone. So this is our traditional format for our updates that we do at this committee. We'll run through the technical things, we'll get into financing, and as the chair has said, we're kind of walking our way towards an application. And then hot off the presses, we have another grant application to talk about. So since our meeting here on April 15th, the design group met on April 16th. They discussed, they continue to discuss sludge handling and disposal options. That's a pretty substantial part of the project. They talked about wastewater treatment plant hydraulics, how water moves through the plant under a range of flow conditions. There was some pretty extensive discussion about equipment selection for blowers for the SBR, the sludge and the post air. So RFIs, which are requests for information, went out to various manufacturers. Mechanical bar screen and grit removal, same thing, RFIs were issued. We continue to coordinate with Orange and Rockland Utility, and we continue to work with DOT, and folks will remember that the DOT work is to establish a new, ideally permanent entrance to the site off DOT's road so that we can relieve some pressure on Evergreen and River. So
yeah, we had a meeting with the DOT last week, and there's kind of two parts to that. One is the access. Another is a potential for maybe a phase down the road, making sure there's enough space on the property to put some of the equipment and might go encroaching into the state's right away. So we talked about maybe trying to get some property from them eventually in the long run. But the more immediate need would be the access off the state road, new access.
I drove down about a week ago, and that property along 17, it looks like there's a smaller property closer to River Road. And then it looks like there's a bigger property. It's almost at the end of the property line of the sewer plant. And in that area, you can see the pond over by Mary Harriman Park. So would they be taking up both of those areas, or how do you envision it?
I mean, it's basically between Evergreen Road and the end of our property.
The end of the property.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for, as much of that as we could possibly get, with an access point near where the filter building is, if you know where that is,
Yep.
in relationship, that would be the access point. And we want to try to acquire as much land along between the 17, Route 17 and our property line where the fence is.
And when you say acquire it, would be a long-term easement?
Well, we're putting an application in for a request for surplus land is what they call it, to apply for that.
So we would own it.
We
would
would.
be- At the end of the day,
Then own it.
we would own
The
it.
right of way there is wider than it normally is,
Mhm.
because they had shifted the road over from years ago, so they have much more land than they normally do.
Yep.
And the shoulder, and
It's also kind of pie shaped. It's kind of an odd shaped piece of land. So,
Yeah.
They moved the road, or they designed it and built it, a little bit differently than what they own. So it gives us an opportunity to maybe acquire some of that surplus land that they have, allowing them to have with them continuing to own about 30 feet off of pavement.
Yeah,
That's what they're basically requesting.
And we also approached them, and I think Bob brought this up in a meeting with them, is they said it was 1 to 2 year process to acquire land potentially, and there was no guarantee that it would allow us to cap the land. The access was is a much shorter application, which is good, we need that in the forefront. But if we need it for construction for more immediate purposes, maybe some type of temporary construction easement in the vicinity where we would look to get the land, which is not where the entrance is, it's to the
Yeah.
right. For the purposes of constructing and having access to the site, not having to go off of what's in the road on the site, Evergreen, as opposed to accessing for construction purpose of Evergreen and just giving us more space in there for temporary access. So we'll,
that's huge for the host community there, Harriman, to take that pressure off of River Road.
Yeah, if everything goes according to plan, we would then have that as a point of, accessing and egress and ingress of vehicles. It's a little bit difficult if you look at the actual, the way the road is situated, it would be a right turn only out of the facility and right turn into the facility as well.
Yeah.
We can't make the turnaround, but at least what you can do is probably alleviate half the amount of volume of trucks by being able to use River Road and Evergreen Road in conjunction with Route 17, or you use 17 all the way. And what it's going to require is you can ingress, and then you have to have some sort of a turnaround,
Inside.
you take a right off of, out of the facility, and then somehow, if you have to go the other way, you're going to have to turn around someplace.
Yeah. Good,
But
good. Also,
definitely, it relieves a lot of traffic pressure in that area.
great.
Absolutely.
Great, that's what we need.
Yeah.
Kelly, can you also just make note that Mayor Neil Dwyer, the Village of Monroe, has joined us, and also Commissioner Denenga. You else to miss? Great, sorry, Mary Beth, for
No,
the
that's-
detour there.
no, that's terrific. And everything that we're doing with DOT are things that have been done in other locations with DOT. So we're not asking them to do something that they have not done in other construction situations and other situations for public infrastructure and even for private projects. This is sort of common, real property things that DOT does. So
Great,
it will be a process. It I think was articulated, it takes some time, but they can be pretty responsive, so.
great.
So on sub-consultants, folks will recall, had survey work done quite some time ago at the end of last year. The lemon asbestos survey that has to do with demolition of some structures. Ambient is on board to do that, and I think we're still just coordinating a start date with them. And geotech RFPs were out, came back. There were 3. They are being reviewed for their responsiveness. They were all within the budget that's been established. So right now, they're under internal review and coordination with staff for their responsiveness. And at least 2 of those were local firms. So good on that. Nope. Regulatory status. So the first one is kind of a no change. We submitted the interim 9.0 MGD speedies back in March. And DEC acknowledged receipt and they are reviewing it. We received on April 21st, NOIA 3. NOIA stands for Notice of Incomplete Application. The third of those for the 6.0 MGD speedies variance. We kind of worked on that in short order. We had a staff meeting to review the comments on May 1st. On May 5th, after speaking with staff, we sent an email to DEC staff asking for a meeting to clarify comments. And then on May 9th, DEC emailed us to ask us for a description of specifically what areas we were looking for guidance so that they know who should attend the meeting. We responded on the same day. So it's our understanding that DEC is currently coordinating internally to gather the staff that's necessary because it's staff across a bunch of different areas of DEC to propose back to us times for meeting. We are seeking to have that done as an in-person meeting. We think that will give us more progress than doing it as a virtual meeting. And the last one is also kind of continues from prior, no changes. We received comments on December 11th to our 6th. We had submitted on September 11th in 2023 a 6 MGD speedies renewal in response to a request from DEC. We received their response to that more than a year later, December 17th, 2024. We responded on March 17th, providing them with the information that they required, and we have not heard anything additional from them on that front either. That kind of covers the technical and regulatory. I don't know if anybody has any more questions.
Committee members? Oh, yes, could you please note that legislator Katie Benelli has joined us too. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, so now we're on to everybody's favorite topic, financing. We will be submitting an application on May 30th, or really before May 30th, for financing through the Clean Water Step Revolving Fund. I wrote out kind of our process here, things that have been done to date, things that are coming up. On Friday of last week, we provided a draft review of an application to the Office of the State Comptroller, to the Law Department for their review. On May 27th, I believe between Eric's office and the Law Department, they're coordinating for that application to be on the agenda for fiscal services. And then it's anticipated that on the June 5th meeting of the legislature, there'll be an approval to submit that Part 85 application to the Office of State Comptroller. And then we will package everything together and get that submitted to the Office of State Comptroller. We anticipate that will be during the week of June 9th because we need certified copies of the resolution to go with that. And that is part of the overall steps that are involved in this application for financing that will go in at the end of May of this month. And folks may recall, we've talked about this a few times. People have asked, why are we in such a rush? There's a couple of reasons. One is that this opportunity to submit an application for financing occurs only once a year. So if we don't submit on May 3rd, on or before May 30th, we miss the boat for a year, which is a long time. The second reason, and really the really pressing reason for this particular project in this particular year, is something called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which was adopted by Congress back during the COVID crisis. It provided for funding for 5 federal fiscal years, and this is the last year of the program. Program is ending. And Congress has not taken any action to create or extend this program any further. It wasn't intended to be created or extended any further. This application on May 30th, it's embedded. It's all part of the same process that we are doing. And why is it so important? Because it can provide up to 50% grant, 50% zero interest loan for a 30-year term, up to $25 million. So it would be $25 million in grant, $25 million in zero interest financing against our rather costly project. So that would be a huge savings to users if we can secure the grant and the zero interest borrowing. So that is why we have been driving so hard towards this date, is we want to make sure that we get this application submitted within that timeframe. So we can potentially take advantage, there's never any guarantees, right? But we can guarantee you will not get the grant if you do not apply. That's a guarantee. But what we can do is we can apply and open the door to potentially getting this grant and loan combination. And as I mentioned here, it's targeted projects that meet a combination of water quality improvement objectives where a resident's ability to pay for a project is limited and the community has suffered disproportionately from environmental impacts and is economically disadvantaged. And that does describe some of our service area. So we are working hard at that.
Mary Beth, just one
Yes.
thing, just going back up to the first area. May 27th, 2025, Physical Services recommend submission. So do we need to get a resolution to Chairman Cheney? And would that come, that recommendation, as a form of a resolution, or
It is my understanding that the law department is doing that.
they're doing that?
Yes.
So we'll have to go to Chairman Cheney's Physical Services on the 27th. Okay.
Do we know
Thank-
where that is in the process?
We submitted the draft application on Friday to the law department, and well, everybody here got a copy of it. So is my understanding, I know Rick said he couldn't be here today. We can certainly follow up with Joe. I know Eric, you had talked to Joe recently.
Yeah, I can follow up with Joe as well. Is that,
I'll take it.
Okay, thank
we'll
you.
make sure, yeah, we
Red
send,
line for the meetings. Wednesday.
no, not that this is for June,
Oh, for June.
right?
This is for May.
Oh, it is for
This is
me.
for May,
Oh.
May 27th, which is why we got the draft in on Friday.
Okay. Yes.
That was our schedule. And the draft
That was
is,
the June 9th, yeah.
yeah, the draft is substantively complete. It has, we just need some like text information and things like that to go in.
Good.
So yes, thank you.
So we're down on to item 3 then, on the bottom.
So item 3 is the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. This is a state grant program. It was included in the state budget that was recently adopted. While we can't be guaranteed, it appears that the program rules and things are all going to be the same as have been in the past. The one missing link with this is we don't have a date yet. We don't know when this program is going to be announced and when we will make a submission for it. But when it is announced, we will make a submission for it. Obviously running through the county's law department and grants. This one provides up to 25 million, again, in $5 million annual increments against 25% of net project costs. So it's a pretty big source of funding. So we'll be looking at that. And then our hot off the presses for today is something called the Water Quality Improvement Project Program. And I have some paperwork for everybody on this. And I'll put this one down. So this program was just announced yesterday. So whenever you say it's hot off the presses, it is really hot off the presses. I would have included it in the packet, but I had already printed my first sheet before I got this information. So what you have in front of you is the cover sheet for DEC's guidance document for the Water Quality Improvement Project Program. Then you'll see it starts on page 12 and it runs through page 20 something odd, 22, 23. That's because this is part of a 200-page document. So I spared you all the things that didn't have a lot to do with you. This program is a grant program. It's been around for a long time. The application we now know is due July 31st. Again, this is another program where we'll strive to get these applications in advance. It is up to $10 million for construction of wastewater improvements. And it's intended for projects with a direct improvement to water quality in stressed watersheds such as Ramapo. And what I provided you with is the programmatic information for this project. If you flip into the pages, you'll see there's a lot of boxes. I highlighted a few areas for you. The area where we would be applying is under general wastewater projects, other wastewater treatment plant improvements, That's $10 million, it could be 25%.
What page is that, Mary Beth?
That's on page 15. Sorry. A lot of paperwork. And then continuing, what I did was I went through the scoring criteria for these projects, which began on page 20 for this particular aspect of the program. And I kind of gave you a few insights into what areas we would be applying under. So projects that reduce discharge of a pollutant documented in the WIPWL. You'll remember, this is on the 303D, the ramp was on the 303D list. Segment fact sheet is a pollutant causing water bodies best uses to be assessed as impaired or polluted. Then it goes on to say that projects are located in a HUC 12 watershed class A or double A, and it continues. So that's one of our criteria. Classification points, we are in one of the higher point area of assessment of classification. We assume our costs are reasonable, so we always push for the maximum amount of points there. In terms of project readiness, this is a huge project, as you all know, we've been working on it for a very long time. Project will be ready to go out to construction within 2 years, though. Experience and ability, the county has shown exceptional ability to manage state funds and do its work, so full points should be awarded there. And then this is an area where there is potential environmental justice area and disadvantaged communities, so we should receive some additional points with respect to that ability to pay. Oh, and I forgot to highlight the back. But we will assess the climate resilience and the flood resilience of the project, and we should receive some additional points there as well. So long story short is, as you can see, these are competitive programs. So telling the compelling story of this project and why it's important to human health and the environment will be what our goal will be in working on this grant application. Each of these grants has sort of a different purpose. So we're really taking the same project and making sure that we are focusing our application materials towards the purpose for which Congress or the legislature set aside the funding. And then we also do quite a bit of work to make sure that the folks who are receiving these grant applications understand the importance of these projects and that these projects have the support of the community, legislature, and those kinds of things. So this project, again, hot off the process, just came out yesterday, May 19th. There's a webinar, if anybody is curious about this, on June 9th. If you go on the DEC website, you will find the information for the webinar. There's a Q&A period that runs until July 10th, and then DEC will post all of their response to questions that people have asked, and the applications are due on July 31st. And then, as you see, awards tentatively December.
What date, June?
June 9th is the webinar.
Mary Beth, there's a lot of numbers going here, and I'm just curious. And then you just got it yesterday, you may not have had a chance to do it, but you know the extent of the in-depth research that has gone into this. So when you look at the way these points are here and lined up, is it too early that you could give us a projection of where you think that we might land in the scoring?
That's a great question. The challenge here, so this is about $75 million in funding that's been set aside for this program. And as I mentioned to you, there's a couple of factors we have to think about. This is page 12 through 20 something of a 112-page document. So there's other aspects of the program that are also going to be receiving grant applications. So the whole 75 million doesn't go, and it also says those words at least 75 million are important because this programming can be added to with other programming from the Environmental Protection Fund. You may remember a few years ago, there was an Environmental Bond Act that was adopted by voters. So there's ways that that 75 million can get bigger if there's demand, right, to meet that, which is a good thing to know. So part of the challenge was saying, how will we do, is we don't know what the universe of other applicants for the same source of money is. So if we end up being, you know, among the most compelling applications that is describing impacts, positive impacts to human health and the environment, our chances should be very good. However, if somebody walks in the door and has an incredibly, incredibly compelling story that maybe is somehow more compelling than ours, you know, perhaps there's a, you know, someone's addressing maybe a water body where there's a direct drinking water component to it. So maybe, you know, there's a source of contamination in the environment that someone's removing and that will restore a drinking water source. That would get probably more points than we will, because ours isn't a drinking water source. So there's sort of this balance, right? So it can be difficult to know what the universe of applications will be, but these are highly competitive, I will say that. Program's been around for a long time. This is probably somewhere in the high 20s to, you know, close to 30 years worth of program. There was only a few years where this program was not funded by the legislature and did not run in the last 30 years. So what I will say is that the program is really, really competitive. If you take some time to look through the balance of this document, you'll see that there's some very specific programmatic areas that they go after. This might surprise a lot of people, but there's still a lot of wastewater treatment plants that do not disinfect their water before they discharge to the environment. So there's a focus in this particular program to provide grant funding to put seasonal disinfection on wastewater treatment plants where they lack it. There's a few others. There's a one for areas where they consider the non-point sources of solution, where perhaps you have like maybe a lake community and everyone has a septic tank and everyone has a leach field, and those leach fields are all contributing into the water body, and that lake is becoming, maybe it has a lot of HABs, harmful algae blooms, or maybe it's got really high phosphorus or nitrogen. So there's a section of this program that focuses on coming up with solutions to address those. So this is a big program. You can write watershed plans with this program. You can do, if you're something called an MS4, a municipal separate storm sewer, you can get funding to map your storm sewers. If you don't know where they are, how will you ever figure out what to do about them? So this program provides broad funding, all focused on the environment, all focused on water quality in the environment. So it's a little hard to say, but our job will be not to worry so much about other people, but to figure out how to tell the most compelling story we can about why we should receive grant funds for this program.
Thanks. Many members and legislative hotel.
Thank you, Sean. I have two questions. One is, I've seen some cuts happening. Have you seen any of these? Not particularly these, because obviously you wouldn't have included them if they were. Have you seen any cuts to any grants that we have discussed or that you think we might qualify for? I know we had talked about several others in the past.
So this is the hit parade. The two at the bottom are state funded programs, right? They're both in the budget just started. Bipartisan infrastructure law is in its last year. There's been words about it,
Right.
but not so much about this portion of it.
Oh, good.
Right, there's a lot of pieces and parts to that law. That law did things like money for ports and airports and rail stations and things. Bipartisan infrastructure law also funded the build out of EV charging stations. That I think is money's probably going to be taken away. It sounds like, but programs for water and sewer are pretty broadly popular across the board. And this program is in its last days. We've not heard anything specific that is going to stop. And then Clean Water State Revolving Fund, that program is a companion program called Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. SRF was created in the late 80s, early 90s. It was the end of something called the Construction Grants Program. This is the program that replaced it. It has always been funded by Congress in one way or another. Now the money's gone up and down.
Right.
Right. But again, it's a highly utilized program. It is competitive among the states for the seed money. New York State, New York manages their program extremely well. It is truly a revolving fund where interest payments feed the fund, and where New York State manages the money so that the money grows. So we've, in my rather long career, I've seen it go up and down. I've never seen it go away. I've seen, in recent years, we've seen grants added to it, when in the past there never were any grants. It was just a loan program. So we've seen the addition of grants to address the idea that sometimes, people still need to do a project, but paying back debt can really vary. Particularly, we have a lot of really small communities where that pipe is the same pipe, whether Orange County with how many ever thousands of users is buying it, or some little community with 10 users is buying it, you still have to pay the cost of the pipe. So if anything, we've seen those programs continue to be funded more and be funded more broadly. So right now, we're really comfortable with this list. And we're comfortable with water and sewer in general and environmental quality in general, because people want to live in a good and clean environment.
And then the second question I have, and it lends towards your vast experience. Have you ever seen, and this might be something that would have to be kicked over into physical services, but have you ever seen where the host community of the facility receives a discount on their gallon, the regular cost, not any kind of improvement cost or so on and so forth, what we're talking about at this? Have you ever seen anything along those lines?
I think if our friends from the law department were here, and I think they kind of answered this question in a different way, there is not a way you all similarly situated users under the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution of the United States have to be treated the same. So everybody has to be treated the same. You flush your toilet, whether you're flushing it here, you're flushing it somebody else, everybody kind of has to be treated the same, right? Similar situated users. That said, what we do for host communities is what we've already started doing, which is having dialogue with the village, with the mayor. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to work on things to mitigate the impacts, because as a host community, there are impacts. Addressing the odors, trying to reduce local truck traffic during construction. We'll make sure that there's a lot of communication. The mayor and I already were talking about this, a lot of communication about, there may be times when contractors bring materials on site. So there may be a particularly heavy truck traffic presence on a particular day or two. There is no reason we will have that information. We will know what's happening in advance, so they're keeping communication. So really the way that we work with host communities is particularly to reduce unexpected or unknown conditions that are known to the construction site, but unknown to people outside, right? So really good communication, and then trying to, as best we can, reduce the impacts of having that site sit there. So the things we usually think about are truck traffic, noise, odor, dust, those kinds of things. We try to reduce those as much as we can. Construction hours, Mayor and I spoke a little bit about construction hours.
Right.
Those kinds of things to try to reduce the impacts on the community. I think we've said this before. This is probably not the ideal location for a very large wastewater treatment plant.
Right.
But somebody in the 1970s decided to put it there. And so now our job working with the county is to try to reduce those impacts on that neighboring community as much as we can. So that's.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Peter.
Chairman?
So I was, just a little bit of an update. I was contacted by Senator Skoufis on May 6th at 8:30 at night. 8:30 at night, keep in mind what I just said. And he was still negotiating the state budget. And he told me that if we got him documents before 9:45, he would put our project, try to put our project in the state budget. And so I contacted Chairman Toohey, and he wanted documents, in other words, to justify the application. And I didn't have them at my fingertips, Peter didn't have them at his fingertips, so I called Legislative Counsel Betsy Abraham. She got in her car, she drove here at 8:45, got all the documents together, and had them to Senator Skoufis and I by about 9:30. So in time for his submission, he submitted it. He thought he was going to get quite a large sum of money. And 2 days later, he called me back and said he got nothing. But so the reason I'm telling you is the money was not going to be stopped because of a lack of effort on the part of the county of Orange. But what I told Senator Skoufis is good job for trying. You got 5 years to come through with more money, keep up the good work. Now he's got all the documents, so it's not striking out. You know, he might have struck out on that one, but we got a few years to go to get more money, so that might be another source of income actually within the state budget. So it was a strikeout this year, but not necessarily the years to come.
Thank you, Chairman, for bringing that up, and I didn't know how it concluded, so
Yeah.
we'll try.
So not good news, but not bad news, because he's gonna keep trying, but kudos to our
It's
council.
on his radar now.
Left her house at night, came down and put it all together and had it ready for submission.
Legislative, go ahead, Legislative Benelli, and then we'll
Thank
go.
you so much. Meredith, we see that our next involvement would be to get a resolution passed on June 5th. And all of the other things that you're talking about here. When is our next for legislative action?
So we will, do that action on June 5th. Then, the July meeting, we will need, a resolution to approve to submitting this grant application on July 31st.
So you will need that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we will need, so there'll be, you guys have a lot to do.
And that's the July meeting.
It'll be the July meeting,
So
so
it would have to be June.
business services. Correct. So we will prepare we have staff already, since this was announced yesterday. We have staff already working on the application. Because they're not mysteries, these are again, this is an annual program. So we have staff working on the application. We'll get a draft application again to Grants and Law in advance so that they can review it. And then it'll go to June Physical Services and July Legislature for an approval to make that submission at the end of July. And then we don't know when that Water Infrastructure Improvement Act program is gonna come out.
Okay.
That's one that's been extremely variable. I put usually summer. The last few years it's been summer, but it used to be in spring. At one point, it was in February. It's moved around a lot. So we're not entirely sure. We do know it was in the budget. That's good news. But also, we all know the budget goes from April 1st. So it could be next March because it's still within the budget year. We had one year where that was the case. So, and that one, is it's much more smoke and mirrors and alchemy about when it comes out. It's very popular. It's an extremely popular program. So I would imagine we'll see it come out, again, sometime later this summer, August.
So for now, the knowledge that we have, we're looking at the June and July meetings.
Right.
In May also, right? Because-
It's so May, yes.
Well, that's May Physical Services for June.
Yep, yep.
Thank you.
So we will do our best to continue to keep on track and keep schedules moving and communicate with everybody and
So
then
we're-
we'll see where we.
In June, to go to fiscal services in June, do we have actions we'll need to take in the June sewer advisory?
It'll probably be something similar to this, but we'll provide you with an update. The application for these programs is all online. Like, there's really nothing for me to show you. But what I will tell you is it's all the same things you've already seen 100 times, right? It's our engineering report, it's the financial information that we talked about in terms of project costs, in terms of user impact. What we end up doing is taking, to the chairman's point, you're just taking the previously prepared information, providing it to people in the format they're asking for. So there's just not a lot to share, but it's more that we do need authorizations for submissions of these
The
applications.
reason why I'm asking is, we've talked about doing a tour
Okay.
down at the Harriman wastewater treatment plant.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if, since everybody has this time every month, if it would make sense that in June, instead of meeting here, we could do a tour down in Harriman. And if we had any kind of thing we needed to discuss as a committee, we could do that there. And then if anything had to go to physical in June, we'll be able to do that. You don't see any kind of conflict with that?
There's the conference room there.
Do you think, like 1:30,
Yeah, we can do it at
the
1:30,
regular time? Yeah,
or regular times too, but
two, okay, whatever you want.
we can move it up.
But,
I'm
well,
just-
we have to think about people that
People
can get
traveling.
back here
Yeah.
for,
3:30,
Oh,
somebody.
So 3:30.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
make it
one of
one.
those, I'll be back with both.
should be some, probably.
You wanna do it like,
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock or
Sure.
1? No, maybe even 12:30.
My question. Circling back to what's.
Hold on, let's just try to finish this up. So do you think maybe 12:30?
We do it at 11 o'clock in the morning. Everyone.
Go
That's
for lunch.
that close to breakfast?
We're there all the time.
Yeah, sewer plant's 24/7, you can pretty much come to 2 o'clock in the morning if you want to.
Well, what we'll do is we'll work on a time.
Yeah,
and
we'll
then
plan to
tell
So
you.
you're thinking a tour, Peter?
Just because a lot
Yeah.
of people haven't here, so it's gonna be a quick tour,
Yeah, I'll set it up with Steve Coleman
you
and
know, and I think it's good for people to see where's this access ingress gonna be, where,
absolutely, yeah.
you know.
But I'll walk through the entire plan process and
Yeah.
we'll look at the access.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could even state where we think the access is gonna go, based on plans.
Should be pretty obvious, but yeah, that's, we can.
Is that considered a public meeting?
Yes.
It would happen.
So it would have to be advertised the same as that.
What would that be?
Notice.
The tour and
The tour with the full committee, is it considered a public meeting?
so we did the last time we did it, was a public meeting, we didn't
Oh, we
have
did?
anybody join us, but we did do the tour and.
Well, we could check with that too.
Yeah, we should check with,
With the attorneys when they're back from all these.
It will be public, it just probably won't be live streamed, that's all.
Yeah, kept the show on the road.
I was gonna send it some.
Legislative Total?
Circling back to what you were saying about Senator Stupis and the budget, have you ever seen any funding for sewer plants come out of DASNY?
So, yeah, so.
Regulatory Authority of State of New York?
Yeah, so there's a couple of good questions. So in terms of line items, which is what you were talking about, we have seen line items, but what we've seen them for are things like Micron in Syracuse or Globe Foundries, Chobani Yogurt, some of these really, really big economic drivers, right? We have seen some line items in the budget over time. The DASNY money that we deal with is often, it used to be called State and Municipal Facilities. It now has a new name, community something. But it's basically a fund through the legislature that are essentially like earmarks, like the old school earmarks.
Right.
So we do have a number of different senators and assembly people who have access to that funding, who have been able to provide money to support water and sewer projects. Also things like sidewalks and little league ball fields and just sort of public infrastructure that people need that doesn't get paid for one reason or another, handicap access to municipal buildings, those kinds of things. A couple of notes about it. Typically, it's not millions and millions and millions of dollars. What we're typically seeing is it's $300,000, $500,000, maybe up to $1 million. But it's usually not millions and millions and millions. The way the programming works is you receive a notice saying that you've been, from your representative saying that they've secured funding for you. You then go through a pretty protracted process to apply for that funding, and then it's reimbursement based, so you spend the money upfront and then you get reimbursed eventually. I will tell you that lightning speed is 3 to 4 years from when you receive notice to when you actually can go get money.
Right.
So we do a lot of those, but it is not a quick process. And it is not generally, these programs that we're targeting we're looking at grants, 10 million and up is kind of what we're trying to do. In part too, because not that everything doesn't count, but for a really, really large project, I think grant agencies want to make a difference. So making the difference is about giving substantial funds so that we can, when we do our math, we can show that those substantial funds actually reduce the amount of money that a user pays. If we put $1 million against this project, it's gonna be somewhere lost in our decimal points.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Because no, and I'm familiar with the reimbursement and the length of the designated grants.
Some of those go through Empire State Development as well. They are actually a little quicker, a little more responsive. But the ones that go through Empire State Development have a tendency to be more about things like downtown revitalization or associated with the Restore New York program, or either demolishing or repurposing an existing building for a purpose, those kinds of things, but
Thank you.
if anybody's interested, it's June 10th. The Regional Economic Development Council is hosting a CFA forum to discuss CFAs and for municipal applicants, and I'm the speaker. So you can come listen to me talk about grants for an hour from 10 to 11 on June 10th.
And is that a Zoom?
It's virtual.
Can you just send the information to Kelly and
I will.
send it out to us?
Well, it's hot off the presses. That was just announced yesterday as well.
Kelly, it'd probably be good to send it out to all the municipal leaders too.
Wednesday, right, June 10th?
Okay,
Chairman,
yes.
I do have another question.
Sure.
Before you move on, we're talking about financing. Where are we with, when do we start to approve a bond resolution? And is that necessary for certain applications for funding?
So it will be, yes.
Refresh my memory.
So it will be. So this schedule that we have up here up top under No.1, all of this nice stuff that has to do with something called Part 85 application.
Right,
We have to conclude our Part 85 application before we can consider a bond resolution.
okay, so this needs to be complete.
So we got to get our Part 85 application to the Office of State Comptroller, and the reason that I didn't continue the schedule is because we then need to hear back from them.
Right.
That process has a tendency to be pretty iterative. It goes back and forth a lot. Because that process is a document collection process. They are looking at all of the pieces and parts of our process to see do we kind of follow all the rules, and they're evaluating the process for this project and its public purpose. So usually their review is a number of months, 3 to 4. So once they're finished with their review, so if we're making a submission in June, we're looking at sometime in the, probably optimistically in the fall before we hear back from them. And we may have some interim submissions. They will write us letters and say, we want you to send us this or send us that, or, those different kinds of things. So we will go back and forth with them. Like I say, normally it's a process of 3 to 4 months in our experience. So it will be towards the fall. Once we're through their process, and we have, there's actually a certification that gets filed with the county here, then we're in a position to take next steps with respect to things like bond resolutions and other things.
And would the bond resolution be piecemealing it or entire projects, or it depends on, I guess, maybe the outcome of that?
Yeah, a bunch of different factors, right? So typically in my experience, and I'm not on council, but typically in my experience, bond resolution is going to talk about project in its whole. It's going to talk about what the maximum project cost is, which is like what we established when we did our map plan report for this. It's going to talk about that. And then to the extent, since it's going to be a number of months from now, to the extent we've identified any other source of funding, we know we're going to have it for sure. So say somebody sends us a letter and says, okay, we're going to give you $10 million. We can identify that and say, that's $10 million of grant funds that we don't have to fund, right? So the bond resolution will recite all of those things. And that would be, these bond resolutions for these types of programs are usually 11, 12, 13, 14 pages long, lots of statutory information in them. And so it, to the extent that we have any funding that we know about, and again, different bond councils kind of handle this in different ways. But the big thing that we have to do is say, what is the project, that it's in the public's interest and why, and then establish that maximum project cost. That's really kind of the thing. It's not, a bond resolution is never telling you that you have to borrow money, it's saying you could borrow money for a purpose, and it's saying you could borrow money up to the maximum project cost, but you're not obligated to borrow. that. So,
So that's the timeframe.
that's the timeframe for that, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, aren't we going, is the county going to be eligible through EFC for zero interest loan during the construction?
So we have submitted an application for that, we've done that already, we did that in advance of this, because that you can submit anytime. So we will have to see what they haven't gotten back to us in time. But how the SRF program works, that's a really good question. There's two pieces to the borrowing. One of them is short-term financing during construction, which acts like a bridge loan. If you've ever built a house or anything like that, or like a line of credit. A lot of people may have a line of credit, maybe a homeowner's equity loan. The value of the construction is available to you to draw down, to pay bills. It's unlike a ban, a bond anticipation note, where you say, give me $5 million and a bank gives you $5 million, it hits your account, you start paying interest immediately. With this program, it's a pretty good program. The interest rates, as you mentioned, are very, very low, sometimes $0, sometimes 0% rather, sometimes just very, very low, around a point or less. And you only start accruing interest on the portions that you draw down. So, as construction ramps up, right? So it saves you a lot of interest. Once the project's finished and you've accounted for everything, then you can close on long-term financing, basically taking that short-term borrowing and rolling it into long-term financing. Long-term financing through this program has zero interest up to 40 years, actually. Subsidy, which under this program is 50% of market and market. I have seen funding packages where a portion of the project is at 0% and a portion of it is subsidized. I've seen them where a portion is at 0 and a portion is at market. There's a lot of different combinations and permutations of the way the funding can come together. The State Environmental Facilities Corporation is, they're just experts at doing this. They're very, very good at it. And their goal is to help you create, unlike, I don't know if many banks are right, but a bank is around to make money, right? Like that's their thing. They're there to make money. This program is about delivering your project at the lowest cost that they can. So they're really driving it, how to put together packages that get you the lowest cost within what you will qualify for. So short-term could be a combination of zero interest borrowing and borrowing at a very low interest rate for different portions of the project. Long-term could be something similar. There are limitations on zero interest borrowing through the program. There's a $25 million limitation, but it's rolling, which is very complex math that comes into play for these really, really large projects that far exceed $25 million. So, but as we roll through, we'll make sure that we continue to articulate, the nature of the funding package that appears to be coming together. It's very rare that we do these projects that there aren't multiple sources of funding involved to try to, again, the goal being high quality project, long durability, and reducing the cost to users as much as we can. Sure. June 10th, come listen to me talk.
Okay, great. Perfect timing, Bob's coming in, but up next, I just wanted to discuss briefly the Village of South Blooming Grove project update. For those of you that aren't aware of it, we did a test at the pump station several years ago. There's a hydrogen sulfide odor that is emitted down by the airplane park in the Village of Monroe. So we actually uncovered what the issue was and the solution. And it was to try to get them both on track with an oxygenation system, that's being Chester's pump station and the Village of South Blooming Groves. So when we did a demonstration and we hooked Village of South Blooming Grove up with it was a big trailer that came in for a week, Bob, or so.
Yep.
So they were running on the same technology, and the odors were gone and the levels were low, and so then the Village of South Blooming Grove did a resolution at the end of that year in 2022 to actually acquire the system. For reasons beyond me and this board, it's never been followed through yet. So that problem still exists down at the airplane park. So several months of maybe the beginning of the year, Bob, if you could pick up here and say what Michael's work's been doing and sending out that weekly readings. And also a little something about, because those readings are just in the manhole covers. But also if you could talk about I think the RFP is going out shortly, but regarding that meter for the ambient air.
Right, we're monitoring in the system itself, in the manholes. We sealed resealed the manhole, resealed any area where odors could be escaping. And so we minimized as much as we can the odors. And we have, like you said, we've ordered a meter that will measure what we call the ambient. Walking around, we can get levels for hydrogen sulfide with a very accurate meter.
So opposed to being the levels that are in the manhole.
Correct.
This would be out and about around
Yes.
it. And you could possibly go 5-10 feet away.
Yeah, this has been a long-standing issue. I think that's when I first met Neil. It's discussing this back probably 5 years ago.
At least,
Yeah.
like 10,
So,
15, before our time.
So we do a report weekly that gives there's a graph that shows temperature, ambient air temperature, shows temperature of the sewage in the inside the manhole, inside the sewer. It gives levels of hydrogen sulfide inside the sewer. And just a discussion of activities that we've done to each week there's something that we may have done to seal manholes or seal venting areas, try to minimize the.
And those levels that are on Michael's Wart's report, we did a report.
Yeah.
There's nothing there that would signal that it was a public health crisis.
Not at all. No. It's well within any standards for that. It's just, you can smell it, you can smell it. So
All right,
we're doing everything we can to minimize that, and we will have actually very accurate readings to say within a very small degree of variation, what these numbers are.
okay.
Okay.
So I'm glad to hear that it's in conjunction with the meter readings that we've always had available. Wow, that Michael's reporting. Now, once we get this new meter, we'll be able to actually do it out and about.
Yeah, South Blooming Grove does treat their effluent. There's basically two pump stations, one in Chester, one in South Blooming Grove, and they both have force mains and they combine and flows down into the Village of Monroe. Like you said, Chester has the oxygenation system. Village of South Blooming Grove uses chlorine. They add chlorine to their wet well that knocks down the bacterial activity and is somewhat effective, but we found not as effective as the oxygenation system. So we have been encouraging them to install that oxygenation system and get a better result.
We've recently reached out to the Village of South Blooming Grove, but it's still at an impasse. Right?
Yeah.
And again, we can't speak to the motives or desires of any other municipalities, so.
Yeah.
All right, so I look forward to that addition to the report for the ambient readings.
Yeah, it's gonna be, I think, once away from.
Well, right now, we are measuring the ambient levels. but we're-
Outside.
Yeah, we're measuring with using a meter that only registers down to 1 part per million.
Yeah.
1 part per million is very offensive.
Yeah.
Okay, and what we're doing is we're getting an instantaneous reading at a particular point that we're taking the reading for. This new meter that we're going to be using goes down to 0.01 part per million.
Okay,
And that's a new standard that the state issued for air quality. You know, anything greater than 0.01 is considered to be a violation in a sense. Now, that's over a period of time, over 1 hour. So what you have to do is have a meter that can continually read your levels, and then you figure out what that concentration is over an hour. So,
And will that new
we
meter
have,
do that? That's capable of
the
that?
new meter that we are purchasing will do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
You guys are on top of it. Legislator Benelli?
You said you're monitoring and the ambient. How long have you been doing it?
We have data that goes back 20 years.
So, and how much has it differed in 20 years?
Well, what happens is typically if the manholes, we've sealed the manholes in the past. And if you're not continually sealing the manholes and checking, and if an oxygenation system isn't maybe doing what it needs to do, or Bloom and Grove isn't putting in the chemical that they need, fugitive gases can sometimes get released. So the idea is to seal the manholes. And there's a second component to this. So you seal the manholes, you leave the gas inside, and you could, perhaps not treat and still have very, very high levels inside your sewer system. But they end up dissipating as you go down the line, and they sometimes are not released. But that's not good for the sewer system. It's very corrosive to the sewer system. We've incurred a lot of damage in years past. So there's two components. There's the fugitive gas release, which is mitigated by sealing the entire system, as well as putting in a very effective treatment. That is key. It's paramount to,
At the pump station.
to keep those levels down nice and low, so that you're not having the potential for fugitive gases to release, and you're not causing corrosivity issues to the sewer system. It's a huge investment, for an interceptor and your manholes. You don't want to corrode them.
Yeah.
And we have seen that in the past.
I mean, because I'll go back 40 years.
Right.
I was over there.
32 years, that was one of the assignments that I got. Anthony, go out there and take a look at manhole 111. I couldn't believe what I saw. So I mean,
Are we being more aggressive today than we've been? in the
I think we're
past?
probably as aggressive as we've
As
ever
we
been.
possibly.
Yeah.
And technology has changed.
Technology's changed. There was a very effective system that we had, combination between Chester and Blooming Grove, where Chester was using ferrous chloride and Blooming Grove was using sodium hypochlorite. They actually complement each other. Chester was using that for a long period of time. We actually did a study for them, and things were very quiet. As long as they were applying their chemical, and if they weren't, we were continually monitoring the gases in the manhole. We knew about it. And if that occurred, typically we would get fugitive gases that were releasing, and we would get odor complaints. As long as you're treating, you're keeping your gas levels down, the possibility for fugitive gases to release and corrosivity. But that system was changed back in, I think, 2011 by Phil Salerno to the oxygenation system, with the hope that Blooming Grove would perhaps go
Good follow.
on the same system, and that's not yet happened.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? No? All right, not hearing any, take a motion to adjourn. And, all in favor, aye. And we'll get an email out regarding the tour down at the plant.
June 18th at 12:30, right?
June,
Or I'm sorry,
17th.
17th.
17th,
Yeah,
at 12:30.
17th, got it.